From the land of lakes, this is 10,000 Takes, brought to you by Minnesota Score Radio. Wally and Eric back for yet another week as we slice and dice the always busy, always topical, super saturated Minnesota sports scene. And Wally, there is a lot to talk about regarding teams in the North Star State, but we have to start with the purple. The Minnesota Vikings are on a roll, 10-2 entering the game this week at Detroit, and they just have a knack for winning these tight games. They're walking a tightrope almost every week, and yet they're not falling off that tightrope, are they?
No, 9-0 in one-score games. And remember, last year, they lost them all. They played more.
Yeah.
I think that they set the NFL record for most one-score games in one season, and they were not very good at them. This year, they're 9-0, and it's a broken record for that matter. I mean, they just keep pulling it out at the end or surviving at the end or whatever the case may be. They did it again against the Jets. You mentioned Detroit this weekend. They did it early on against Detroit at US Bank Stadium, if you recall. Maybe last year was a learning curve for them, and they've got more confidence now for whatever reason. You could say it's the coach. You could say it's an influx of a few new players. Pick your poison there. But I think that the Vikings have, even though they're not garnering huge national attention, because, if you listen to the national pundits, they'll tell you, well, they got clobbered by Philadelphia and they got murdered by Dallas. So how good could they possibly be? Well, they're beating everybody else. That's all I can say.
They are. And really in today's NFL, specifically 2022, almost every game is a one-score contest.
True.
I mean, it's a record high amount of close games.
Right.
So parity is at its apex, and they've learned how to win the close games, and that does build confidence. So you're watching a 20-3 lead last Sunday at the House of Noise against the New York Jets. You're watching it shrink in front of your very eyes, and the Jets had 2 red zone possessions on the final 2 offensive drives of the game for New York. And I'm sure on the sideline, they were probably, okay, this is a little tense, a little dicey,
right.
But they had to be thinking, we'll find a way to get it done. Jets had a drop touchdown pass by Braxton Berrios, and then at the end, Cameron Dantzler with the interception.
Well, there's no doubt that they thought they might not be able to stop them because Kevin O'Connell used his timeouts on defense, thinking, okay, they got 1st and goal here. If they score, we may not get the football back. And so he used his timeouts, and then they ended up having to punt, and then the Jets used their timeouts, and, it just went back and forth. But they won the football game against the Jets. They're going to win this division. Whatever happens on Sunday in Detroit, they're going to win this division, and it'll be their first since 2017.
Detroit's saying, wait a minute, if we win, we're still in it.
Yeah,
they can punch out the Lions with a victory in Detroit.
And they punch out everybody in the division.
Well, I'm not even talking about Green Bay or Chicago.
Yeah,
they're irrelevant. It's Detroit now.
Yeah, I mean, okay. The only way for this to happen for Detroit would be for them to win the rest of their games and for the Vikings to lose the rest of their games. And then Detroit would have to win some tiebreakers, too, by the way. Let's not forget that, because they would be tied.
Right.
That's the best thing they could do.
They're the flip side or the antithesis of the Vikings. You look at their losses, and they're all these one-score defeats, including one in Minneapolis. They're finally starting to learn how to win some games. So I think Detroit will be fired up at the minimum for Minnesota. We'll see what happens.
Okay. Kirk Cousins did not have a great game against the Jets. They won the football game, put together a key drive in the 4th quarter to give them that 27 points, that last touchdown, because the 3rd quarter was just abysmal. Defensively, they gave up a ton of yards.
It was a goose egg.
485 yards, I think they gave up total offense that the Jets rolled up on them. But they didn't let them into the end zone. Let me ask you this. Are you okay with them with this bend but don't break? Because, look, the one thing that I don't see a lot of, and it's because of the type of defense they're playing, more of a zone, more of a shell defense, whatever you want to call it, that they don't blitz very often. I think if they mixed it in a little bit more than they do to give the quarterback a little less time, they wouldn't get burned, but they certainly would put some more pressure on the quarterback because they didn't get to Mike White at all.
No, they did not. I think they had one sack. The
One
Vikings
sack,
did
that's
in
not
that
enough.
game. And bend but don't break. Look, I think if you're a Viking fan, you're okay with it as long as
they
it's
win.
sustainable.
Yeah.
I mean, even the Purple People Eaters back in the day, there was some bend but don't break in their heyday, but they also had some dominant wins as well sprinkled in. So I think one concern I have in watching them get just shredded by Dallas and the New York Jets, as you said, compiling a lot of yards. Running backs out of the backfield. We saw Tony Pollard do it twice for touchdowns for the Cowboys. They get matchup issues there. And then we saw the New York Jets hit some balls on the edge to their backs. I feel like the Vikings need to tighten that up. And maybe, as you pointed out, they're in that shell, kind of a glorified Tampa 4 or whatever it is, and it's allowing space on the edge. But look, it feels like a house of cards. You just feel like at any given time this is all going to come down in a heap. But they're winning. They're garnering a lot of confidence. I was in the locker room after the Jets game. There's a loose vibe in there.
Yeah, I agree.
These players deserve to feel good about what they've accomplished. Bottom line is you're 10-2.
Yeah. Okay, tell me that they won't put Danielle Hunter out in coverage anymore. Let's have him rush the passer and not try to guard tight ends or running backs coming out of the backfield. I'm not thrilled with that concept at all.
Well, and that was one of the things we heard when, at the beginning of the year when they paired him up with Zadarius Smith, who came over from Green Bay. As well, these guys might have a hand in the turf or they might drop back. Well, I think you're right. His strength is as a pass rusher. You do want to generate more pressure because, and if you don't have to blitz, that's even better for your backside. But it's an interesting team.
Yeah, they are. Well, they keep winning. And what more can you say? By the way, I know I wasn't in U.S. Bank Stadium this past Sunday. I was in Duluth, enjoying Bentleyville and whatever else in Duluth, watching it on television. But did they have the soap snowflakes?
Oh,
the fake
of course.
Snowflakes?
Yeah, everything in there is
so you had snow
artificial
inside U.S. Bank Stadium.
We had it all.
Okay.
And, it's the house of noise, and you've got phony snowflakes falling from the roof and all that good stuff. The pivoting doors were shut, as you might imagine.
Really?
I do want to say this, though. You mentioned Kirk Cousins. He didn't put up, fantasy numbers on
not
Sunday.
at all.
But, boy, this guy's tough. He had one scramble. It was like Joe Kapp circa 1969. He gutted it out for 11, and he didn't give himself up with the baseball slide. He was ready to get hit. And the more I watch Kirk Cousins, his most impressive trait in my eyes, he's durable. He lines up every week ready to go. Jimmy G's out now in San Francisco. Lamar Jackson got banged up. There are many others. Hey, one thing about Kirk Cousins and all the chains and everything, he's ready to go on Sunday.
Captain Kirk, I guess the Vikings version of Cal Ripken.
Yeah, he is durable.
Yes.
All right, stick around. A lot more coming up. We'll talk some hoops and pucks with Minnesota Gopher legend Trent Tucker. This is 10K Takes, your purple ticket.
I've been meaning to give you these for many years. I think they're perfect.
Maya?
Oh, I love your earring. Why didn't you try these?
It isn't just about vision. It's about care. Nobody cares for eyes more than Pearl.
$10,000 Takes rolls along, and we are now going to switch up and talk some hoops with our guy Trent Tucker. Of course, played for the New York Knicks, most notably the Chicago Bulls with Michael Jordan, and of course he's a former Gopher. Trent, welcome to the show. And tell me, as you look at this version of the Minnesota Timberwolves right now, Karl Anthony Towns hurt, what do they have to do in order to create some kind of identity? Because I don't know what that identity is. They don't have Cat. Rudy Gobert has not quite fit in yet. What are your thoughts on this team and where they are?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. And it's a different basketball team without him. Mostly when he's on the floor, he's a primary offensive scorer. Now that he's going to be away from the team for a few weeks, they have to hang their hat now on their defense, and they have to change their mindset, not to try to outscore people 135 to 130, maybe keep the opponent under 110 to see if they can win a game by playing defense first and foremost.
Trent, the blockbuster trade with Utah in the offseason, it's always risky business when you give up a boatload of players and picks for one guy. Is it too early to say that this isn't going to work out? I mean, I don't sense the chemistry's there. The locker room's different. Or do we need to give it more time?
I think you have to give it more time. What they were trying to do, they were looking for, a power inside guy that could protect the rim, rebound, and help Karl Anthony Towns out. That was the whole talk at the end of last year, that the Wolves needed another inside player who could do some of the dirty work. They were able to go out and get the best player in the league in Rudy Gobert. I think it's going to take some time now for the coaches to figure out how to play these guys together. You have to have a purpose. You have to have a plan, and it starts with the coaching staff. And until they're able to iron those things out, it's still going to take some time for this team to gel.
One of the guys that they dealt away in the Rudy Gobert trade, Pat Beverly. And you and I both know, when you watch them in the postseason last year, how important he was to that team. Not just his play on the court, but what he meant to the younger guys and the inspiration and the defense that he promoted and that he excelled at. I think that they miss him as much as they miss anybody this year. Your thoughts on the loss of Pat Bev, what he meant to these guys?
Well, he was one of those glue guys that brought a certain level of intensity. But for this team, I believe, to go where they think they could go, they had to add a certain type of player to play alongside Karl Anthony Towns. And now when you look at, Pat Bev was traded to Utah. Utah seems like that they're coming back to the mix, got off to a great start. But all of a sudden now they find themselves right in the middle of the Western Conference as well. And since Patrick Beverley now has left Minnesota and gone to Utah, now he's in LA playing with the Lakers, who seem like they're trying to get themselves together. But when you have someone who brings a level of intensity on a nightly basis, especially on the defensive end, he gives your team a slight edge, that you can take into a playoff type game. Sure, you can miss those guys when they're gone.
Do you think Rudy Gobert feels the weight of the world on his back, Trent? I go back to when Herschel Walker came here in that blockbuster with Dallas. Everybody expected Herschel to, wave a magic wand and the Vikings would win a Super Bowl. It didn't happen. More recently, Matthew Stafford with the Rams, and they did win a Super Bowl. But there's a lot of pressure when you're one guy and a lot of guys go to the other team, isn't there?
Well, it is pressure. It all depends on when you come to a certain team, what are the expectations? No one was expecting, I don't believe, that Rudy Gobert was going to carry an offensive load and be the main guy for the Minnesota Timberwolves, because when you look at his career in Utah, they were bringing him to do some of the same things he did there. They had other guys on the offensive end who could carry the load on a nightly basis, like Donovan Mitchell. So by bringing Gobert here, they were hoping that he could plug certain holes on the defensive end and allow the other offensive guys to do the things they do best.
As you look at this club, what do they need to turn things into a playoff type season? I mean, because right now, if the season were to end today, they wouldn't be in the playoffs. They wouldn't even be in the play-in. What do they need to do?
I think it all starts with the defensive side of the ball. And it's hard to outscore players on a nightly basis. And we all know that offense is 50-50. Defense is something that you can bring to the table every night. It's all about effort. It's all about energy. It's all about a commitment. And I know in today's game, the most exciting part of the game today is to see the ball go through the basket. But if the Wolves want to make a run in the Western Conference and become one of those deep playoff contending teams, it's going to have to start on the defensive end.
Minnesota forked out a lot of dough to get Tim Conley as the new GM from Denver, $40 million. Chris Finch already in place as the head coach. How do you establish that synchronization when it's a new GM and a head coach? I mean, are they still trying to work the kinks out, Trent?
I think Conley's going to give, Chris Finch the room that he needs, to develop this team and a philosophy. And we saw last year, there were some things that took place at playoff time that just can't happen. And it starts with the coaching staff. They have to have a plan. You have to have a purpose. And guys have to understand exactly what they're supposed to do and what is expected of them. Until the coaching staff is able to put that certain plan in place, you're going to see inconsistency with this basketball team.
Gopher basketball, Gopher men's basketball, off to a rough start in the Big Ten. They lost big to Purdue. Purdue, one of the top teams in the country. But you can see that one of the issues they're going to have this year is rebounding because they just don't have the size. They've been out-rebounded basically every game throughout this first part of the season. What kind of expectations should we have for not only this year, but going forward with this Gopher men's basketball program?
That's a very good question, but it's very hard to tell at this stage because, after every season, if things don't go well, kids can now go into the transfer portal. So it's hard to build a program over 3 or 4 years like we used to do when I was in college basketball. When you talk about a lack of rebounding, a lack of size, that means now that all 5 guys have to be committed to rebound the basketball. Guards can't leak out looking for fast breaks. They have to come inside the free throw line and pick up those loose, long rebounds to help the big guys out. And if they're not able to secure their own defensive rebound and continue second and third shots, it's going to be a long season for sure.
Trent, you're a hockey dad now. You've got 2 kids in the Eden Prairie Youth Association. I know you're following pucks pretty closely. Is Kirill Kaprizov of the Minnesota Wild one of the more electric athletes you've watched?
From just watching hockey and having the chance of the last few years to get a better understanding of what the game was all about. He's as good as anybody I've seen in terms of his ability to create shots. He's electrifying, like you mentioned. I mean, he's a big-time talent. And what they were able to do the other night when Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid came to town and how the Wild were able to take them out and win that hockey game, it just shows you how talented he really is.
And your kids, how old are they?
11 and 13.
So explain to us how a basketball guy like yourself ends up with kids that play hockey. What in the world is going on in that household?
I lost that argument a long time ago.
I can see that.
Trent, they do know that you once played with Michael Jordan, don't they?
They do know that. They enjoy talking to Michael Jordan and Patrick Ewing more than playing basketball.
Okay.
All right. That takes care of it, I guess. Oh, boy. Well, Trent, we appreciate you spending some time with us. I'm sure we'll check in with you as the season rolls along, both hockey and basketball.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Trent.
He is Trent Tucker, the former Gopher and former NBA champ, right here on 10,000 Takes. Stay with us.
I've been meaning to give you these for many years.
I think they're perfect.
Maya?
Oh, I love your earring. Why didn't you try these?
It isn't just about vision, it's about care. Nobody cares for eyes more than Pearl.
10,000 Takes rolls along. Your Minnesota Timberwolves have been kind of rolling the wrong direction of late. With the Karl Anthony Towns injury, I still think they're trying to find their identity right now. They really don't have leadership on the floor, maybe in the locker room for all we know. Especially with Patrick Beverley gone. I mean, I think that they underestimated the loss of him this offseason because, A, he really pushed them defensively, which is really important because they're one of the worst teams in the league right now defensively. And part of that is effort. Part of it is, they have this size issue now. You've got Rudy Gobert. You had Gobert and Cat on the floor at the same time, so you got big guys getting beat down the floor by little guys. But I think it's desire and effort and just the want to play defense.
It is. Going back to Pat Beverley, he brought energy. The fans loved him. I can't tell you how many fans I saw during the playoffs wearing Pat Bev shirts in the stands at Target Center. And he also, I think, brought accountability. If you weren't doing your job, he was going to get right in your face and, say, hey, this is what you need to do for us to win basketball games. So what they did with this blockbuster deal that it looks like just a total
Boondoggle.
bad decision by the $40 million man, Tim Conley from Denver. Yeah, it is a boondoggle. You're right. And they tinkered with the chemistry of that team. I remember when they got eliminated by Memphis, they blew 3 double-digit leads in that playoff series against the Grizzlies. But when I left Target Center after that Game 6 defeat, I remember talking to my kids and saying, well, they're good. They'll learn from this, but they have the pieces. They will tinker in the offseason and hopefully get better. Well, they didn't tinker. They blew it up. And it really looks like Tim Conley is the new version of Mike Lynn.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know any other way to put it.
No, they blew it up. You dealt away Patrick Beverley. You dealt away Malik Beasley. He was one of their guys that you could bring off the bench and count on to make threes, and that's been one of their pitfalls this year too. Is they don't have consistent three-point shooting on a game in and game out basis. And then Jared Vanderbilt as well. Here's a guy that. And I know I've talked about this several times since the beginning of the season, but here's a guy that would jump into the passing lanes, that would do the dirty work, that would go get that rebound. He wasn't worried about scoring at all. He was just worried about making things go for his team, both defensively and offensively.
He had a role, and he embraced it.
Yes.
You're right. He wasn't, hey, I don't have to be the guy on the stat line. I'm just going to deflect balls. I'll dive on the floor if I have to. I'll make little things turn into big things. So, yeah, they're really a mess. And I don't know if it's going to get much better.
No, and I really don't think that Rudy Gobert is the answer to their problem.
Well, I would not have given up a boatload of players and picks like they did to Utah for Rudy Gobert. Maybe Giannis, maybe Steph Curry, maybe Devin Booker, Jason Tatum. But not Rudy Gobert. This could haunt this franchise and cripple the Timberwolves for a lot of years if it doesn't work. And for it to work, they got to go deep in the playoffs.
Yeah, and I don't see that happening.
No.
Not with this crew. Okay, your Minnesota Wild. Kind of the flip side. Earlier in the week, they won a couple of shootout games. You were at one of them. Kind of putting the pieces together. But it's been a roller coaster. We talked to Darby Hendrickson, the assistant coach for the Wild, earlier this week, and he basically had said that there's still a learning process, and they still need some offensive punch. With Kevin Fiala not in there, that has been an issue for them. Finding some offense someplace else other than Kirill Kaprizov. Now, Kaprizov's spectacular, no question, but he does need help.
He does, and they've been a roller coaster team. They really had a disastrous start, and they were able to dig out of that hole. And now they're on this long trip, primarily in Canada. Yeah, they're making progress. The division they're in has a lot of solid teams. You've got, Dallas is a great team right now, at least to this point. You're chasing teams like Winnipeg. Nashville's in there. I mean, St. Louis is not going to be as bad as they've been. They're going to get a little bit better. Colorado, the reigning Stanley Cup champs, are sitting in your division as well. So I think, Kirill is he's wonderful to watch. I mean, he's a highlight waiting to happen. They need more consistency out of the goalies, I believe. Marc-Andre Fleury, as we talked about, games 1, 2, and 3, and I know Gustafsson played one of those, but he was giving up 6 or 7 goals a night. They've at least been able to get that down.
Yeah. All right, we still have more to go. Takes of the day coming up next. You're watching 10,000 Takes, your Wild ticket. Stay with us.
I've been meaning to give you these for many years. I think they're perfect.
Maya?
Oh, I love your earring. Why didn't you try these?
It isn't just about vision, it's about care. Nobody cares for eyes more than Pearl.
Another episode of 10K Takes Television almost complete, but before we go, we're going to have takes of the day. That's coming up in a couple minutes, but we should be talking as well about the Minnesota Twins. The winter meetings wrapped up in San Diego on Tuesday. A lot going on. Heat up that hot stove.
Yeah, well, and the Twins are, they're going to need to make some moves. What they do is up in the air. Obviously, there's been a lot of talk about Luis Arraez, the batting champ. Should they part ways with him to get a frontline pitcher? And if they do, how high up the ladder are they going to be able to go with Arraez? Arraez is a first baseman, a second baseman, a third baseman, a sometimes left fielder. I mean, you know, where do you put him? I don't think he's a guy without a position because he hits so well. You'll find a position for him, right? But does that work against you, by the way, being a utility guy, that you don't have a set position? Maybe in his case it does.
Yeah, you're a man without a country, basically.
I've heard people talk about this. Well, he doesn't have a position. Well, I don't know if he doesn't have a position. He can play a lot of positions. He can hit. That's all you need to know.
He can hit, and I think he brings a good attitude as well. I think he's a fan favorite. He's easy to cheer for, and he's a throwback. I mean, he can hit the ball, you know, down the left field line, down the right field line, go back up the middle, bang it up the box. I mean, he's the closest thing in this era we have to a Rod Carew type hitter. And if Rocco ever wanted to lay down a bunt and tell his players to learn that art of baseball, I'm sure Arise would be very good at it.
Yeah, okay. That's never going to happen. No. And I think that the analytics are going to drive him out the door because he doesn't hit home runs. So they're probably looking at their computer and saying, wait a minute, no home runs? You're out of here.
Yeah, you're right. He's devalued because he doesn't hit the long ball. One other Twins nugget.
Yes.
You know, it used to be if you wanted to go to their website, it was twinsbaseball.com, right?
Right.
Well, MLB acquired the rights to twins.com, which has been in possession of a couple of twin brothers in California.
Really?
Yeah. And they had been trying to get it for a long time. And they had turned down offers roughly in the $750K neighborhood. Now, MLB did not disclose what they paid, but if you go now, type in twinsbaseball.com, you're at the Minnesota Twins site. And the brothers said, look, we eventually had to cave in. I'm sure the check was pretty big.
Oh, yeah.
But beyond that, their father was from Minnesota, who was a big Twins fan, and the brothers said, well, we got to do right by the Twins. So twinsbaseball.com, baby. New uniforms, new webpage.
Oh, boy. We're on the rise in many ways.
Oh, but not on the arise.
Not on the arise, yeah. Good point.
Yeah, takes of the day now. What kind of mood are you in? We're going to have that Daktronics mood meter light up here shortly. Are you a cranky Yankee, angry American, happy camper, demanding diva? What is it?
Well, we're in a new era in high school sports. Whether you realize it or not, the era of the shot clock has arrived. Now, it's not universal yet across the state. That'll be next season in basketball for both boys and girls. But it is going to be in several, if not most, conferences across the state of Minnesota this year as they run tests and make sure everybody knows what they're doing when it goes forward. And all I can say is thank goodness that the Minnesota State High School League Board of Directors finally crawled out of the 1930s and decided to join us here in the 2020s and get off the non-shot clock era and get into what basketball is in most states across the country and, of course, in college and in the pros, and it's been there forever. So good move by the State High School League Board of Directors to get that finally done. Now all they have to do is fix the state tournament because that has been really not a bad tournament, but a tournament that could be so much better if they get rid of sections and do like they do in football. Football's got it right. That's all they have to look at is football, and they'll get it right.
Mood meter says he's a demanding diva.
Clearly.
And by the way, Twin Cities Business Magazine, I want to give them credit. That's where I found out about the new Twins website, twins.com.
You're all over the place.
But anyways, okay, my take of the day. Now, Minnesota, since the Wild came on board back in Y2K, has become the self-proclaimed state of hockey, right? That's what Minnesota likes to think of itself as. I don't know, though. Colorado's got the NCAA champion Denver Pioneers and the Colorado Avalanche. Maybe Colorado's the real state of hockey, or Denver's hockey town. But Yelp recently ranked the top 25 rinks in the U.S. and Canada. And I thought, well, Minnesota's got to have a few on this list, right? Well, I went up and down the list multiple times. Not one rink from the state of hockey is on the Yelp list. In fact, the top rink is in Santa Rosa, California, something called the Snoopy's Ice Garden or something. 3 of the 5 top rinks are from California.
What in the world? Doesn't their ice melt out there?
Apparently, they've got it down. They're into ice.
Oh, my goodness.
Illinois is represented, Massachusetts, Maryland, other states, but
Minnesota.
Not one from Minnesota.
We're not the land of 10,000 rinks,
No,
apparently.
we're not. And on that note, we're going to FedEx out our thank yous. One to David Weld and the great crew behind the scenes. Also to Daryl Thompson. For Wally, I'm Eric saying so long. This is 10K Takes, your sports ticket.